afternoon, everybody. Migration from Islamic countries in Europe has become a major problem. The emergence of parallel societies, major cultural problems at schools, and problems with the increasing violence against women and also in general. And of course, not just since October 7th, we have observed an increase in Jew hatred in Europe, in our main capitals and everywhere. In Europe, political Islam has become a very serious problem. The goal of this lecture is to provide knowledge of the basic Islamic teachings, which enables us to perceive their impact on politics and society and to respond accordingly. The first part is political Islam and its content according to the Islamic texts. If we go in the debate about Islam, the people always say, but Islam is not Islam, there are many different branches. Yes, of course. The main part of the Islamic community belongs to the Sunnis. Here you can see the law schools of the Sunni Islam. Here you can see the law schools of the Shiite Islam. But now we go to the very foundation of Islam. The very foundation of Islam is the Islamic creed. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. If you speak this in Arabic in front of two Islamic testimonies, you are converted to Islam. But for us, non-Muslims, it shows us the only two authorities in Islam, for Islam. And this is Allah, and everything about Allah we find in the Quran. And less known is the texts about Muhammad, his sunnah, his biography, the seerah, and the traditions, the hadith. What you see here is the whole amount of texts of Islam. If you reduce the Quran with all the doubles, it's 14% of the teachings of Islam is the Quran. 68% are the texts about Muhammad. The seerah, the biography of Ibn Ishaq, was written 150 to 200 years after Muhammad's death. It's 800 pages. I request you to read it because it's enlightening if you know Muhammad's life. And the hadiths are 700,000 little stories about every deed, everything what Muhammad did from everyday's life up to waging war. And 7,000 from these stories about Muhammad are declared as sahih, as reliable. And of course, for our research, we use the collections which are reliable. I want just to mention some of them: Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, and Sahih Abu Dawud. So that's mainly the collections we use for the research. Unique in these texts is that more than half of these texts are dealing with the non-Muslims. How the non-Muslims, the so-called kafir, should be treated according to the Islamic teachings. We never speak about the people, about the individuals, or about Muslims. We always turn to the primarily Islamic texts, just to make sure. Yeah. So 51% of the Islamic texts are dealing with the non-Muslims, and this is the part which is for us political. So we are debating this topic on a political level, and we are speaking about political Islam. Let's turn to the Quran. From the Islamic point of view, it's complete, perfect, and immutable for all times. I don't know who of you already have read the Quran. If you read it, then you will see the surahs, they are not in chronological order. They are ordered lengthwise, as you can see on the graph here. The surahs given in Mecca and the surahs given in Medina, and how they are, the order of the chapters at the bottom. That's why there is missing the context. To understand the context of the surahs in the Quran, you need to understand Muhammad's life. There are missing the instructions. So everybody knows the 5 pillars of Islam: how to pray, how to fast, how to do the pilgrimage to Mecca, how to pay the jizya, the zakat, the tax. So to know how to do that, you need the texts about Muhammad. You will not find the instructions in the Quran. And in the Quran, you find a lot of contradicting messages. I will come to that later, because this is we call it dualism in Quran and in Muhammad's life. But there is a key to understand all this. It's 89 surahs telling us that Muhammad is the best role model for everybody. There has certainly been for you in the Messenger of Allah an excellent pattern for anyone. Don't worry, I will only give you one example, not 89. But just to understand, Muhammad is the one who gives us a detailed interpretation of the Quran. Also, the legal sources in Islam by priority is Allah and Muhammad, the Quran and Muhammad's Sunnah. All the Islamic authorities, if they decide something, at the end they turn to Quran and Sunnah of Muhammad to make their decisions. It's the legal priority, the legal source by priority. According to the Islamic teachings, all prophets, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, and even Jesus, who is called Isa in the Quran, they were all Islamic and preaching Islam. And that's how the allegations of falsified texts against the Jews and Christians came up. But those who wronged changed those words to a statement other than that which had been said to them. So we sent down upon those who wronged the punishment from the sky because they were defiantly disobedient. Muhammad is the seal of the prophets. He's the last in the row. He brought back everything to Islam. What he said is valid for eternity. A short example from the curriculum of Islamic religious education in Austria. If you find Muhammad, you find 27 points. So he's for everyday's life exemplary. He's an exemplary human being. And in this topic circle, the students once again deal intensively with the history of the Prophet as a special role model figure and discuss different phases of his life. Let's go into the life of Muhammad. Nevertheless, there is no archaeological and no historical proof if Muhammad existed or not. But as he is exemplary for the whole mankind, we go in the texts now. Everything what you see in the next few slides, it's according to the primarily Islamic texts, Quran and Sunnah of Muhammad. And to make it easier for you, I will give you an overview. Keep in mind these three periods of Muhammad's life. When he was born in Mecca and when he grew up, and after his migration, his Islamic hijrah from Mecca to Medina, when he became a politician, we can say, and the third period of his life, the conquest of Mecca until his death. Keep it in mind. And now a brief summary of Muhammad's life. Muhammad, according to the Islamic texts, Muhammad was born 570 in Mecca. Mecca was a polytheistic environment. There were very few Jews and Christians. It was polytheistic. The biggest tribe was the Quraysh, and they worshipped 3 gods. Muhammad grew up as an orphan with his uncle Abu Talib and became a businessman. And that's how he met Khadija, and it was Khadija, a successful businesswoman who proposed him the marriage. That's how Muhammad became wealthy and influential. In that time, the first surahs, visions, were sent down by angel Jibril, and Muhammad started to preach the faith to one God, and with that he got problems in Mecca because Mecca was polytheistic. After the death of his wife Khadija and his uncle Abu Talib, Abu Talib, he was a Quraysh, but he was a bit like a mediator in between the Meccans and Muhammad. When those two died, the problems were increasing and it got worse for Muhammad. In that time it was said that he married the 6-year-old Aisha, the daughter of Abu Bakr, the later Caliph. And in this time also the story was sent down that Muhammad flew at night on a flying horse to Jerusalem, and he had insight in heaven and hell. And I mention that because this story has great significance again today. Why? Because among other things, it describes Islam's claim to ownership of Jerusalem. In this time, the satanic verses were sent down. In the Sirah, it is explained what it means. Muhammad always was thinking of ways how to persuade the Meccans to accept Islam. It came to him that the three gods of the Quraysh could intercede with Allah. The Meccans, they liked this possibility, and it came even to some common worship around the Kaaba. But later, Muhammad said that he received these surahs by Satan. So there was no bridge between Islam and the religion of the Meccans anymore. And it came at the end to the Islamic migration, to the Islamic hijrah from Mecca to Medina. This is the beginning of the Islamic calendar, not the revelation of the first surahs, not his spurs. It was the Islamic migration from Mecca to Medina, and that's how Muhammad changed. In the first 13 years, he persuaded 150 people, and then Muhammad became a politician, a lawmaker, and in a very short time period, he conquered the environment where he lived. And he became a politician and a jihadi, and his strategy and tactics changed. What happened in Medina? Medina was very different to Mecca. The first thing was what Muhammad did, he built up the first mosque. And the mosque also served military purposes. He consummated the marriage with Aisha when she was 9, he was 53. And maybe you are familiar with the narrative that Islam only wages war in defense. You have heard of that, I guess. This goes back to this period in Medina, because the Meccans did not accept Muhammad, they did not accept him as a prophet, and not accepting, not submitting under Muhammad and Allah is, according to the Islamic text, it's a crime. So it was possible for Muhammad to start the raids on the trade caravans. It came to the very famous Battle of Badr, 624. Nevertheless, the Islamic armies were a minority, they won this battle. And how important, these are like time markers. These events are very important. This shows, for example, that in Afghanistan there is a special force called Badr 313. Medina was very different to Mecca. There were many Jews. More than half of the population was Jewish. There were three big Jewish tribes, Banu Kanuka, Banu Nadir, and Banu Qurayza. And we cannot go in detail now, but in this time, and this time of the Medinan Quran reveals all the texts of Jew hatred, which are still important today, and especially today they are important. So the Jews did neither accept Muhammad as prophet, nor did they support him in the raids against the other Arab tribes. So this was the reason why one after the other tribe was besieged and expelled. And we can't do that today because we don't have the time, but we should study these processes of the expulsions closely because they are still considered exemplary today. Muhammad signed the Treaty of Al-Hudaybiyah, which was a settlement for a truce. And this treaty, Al-Hudaybiyah, established Islam's attitude about treaties to this day. Political Islam makes a treaty if and only if it is in a weak position. The treaty is good as long as political Islam is weak. We have one example. Yasser Arafat justified the Oslo Treaty in the 90s with this Treaty of Al-Hudaybiyah. Many Jews fled from Mecca and Medina in the direction of Syria, and they stayed at the Jewish oasis of Kaiba. Please remember the word Kaiba, because Kaiba is the synonym over the victory over the Jews. I don't know how it is here, but in Europe we hear this war shout, Kaiba, Kaiba, O Jew, Mohammed's army will come back. We hear it a lot on the manifestations for Palestine, and this goes back to this story, the synonym for the victory over the Jews. And if you see on the right hand, you can see Ishak 747. This is always the quote. You can go in the Sirah of Ibn Ishak and read in the chapter 747 and the following how it took place. Just a short summation. The leader was killed, a Jew was tortured on Muhammad's order to tell the location of a Jewish treasure. Then he was beheaded. Muhammad took Safiya, the widow of the Jew, and married her. I just want to stop here for a moment, because according to the Islamic teachings, Kafir women, non-Islamic women, are seen as spoils of war. And Safiya, she was a Jewish woman, she was the spoil of war, and she belonged to a follower of Muhammad. And he heard that she was really beautiful, so he bought her for some slaves, and then he married her. So first he killed brother, husband, father, and family in jihad, and later he married her. And why did the followers see that she was his wife and he married her? She could have been a sex slave as well, but she had to wear a veil. And the veil is the distinguishing mark of Islamic women, Muhammad's women, and Kafir women, who are considered as sexually available. In Kaiba, Muhammad installed the first dhimmis. Dhimmis, maybe you have heard this term, dhimmis are second-class citizens or semi-slaves, and in Kaiba it was the Jews. They worked the land and gave half of the income each year to Muhammad. They could still be Jews, but they gave up all their power. This shows Islamic tolerance of other religions. And later the tool to have dhimmis is one of the most important tools for the spread of political Islam, which we will see in the history. Muhammad conquered Mecca 2 years after he signed the 10-year Treaty of Al-Hudaybiyah, and all the idols around the Kaaba were destroyed, and those who resisted were killed. There is a whole list in Ibn Ishaq 810. There were slaves girls who had sung satirical songs against Muhammad, a transcriber, and others. And in this time, the Islamic warriors, they asked themselves what to do with the captured women, because they asked Muhammad, can we have sexual intercourse with them? Because they are married in their own cultures, and adultery is a big sin according to the Islamic teachings. So that was the reason why in this time, and you see here there are several surahs in the Quran and many hadiths which allow that captured women can be raped. Kafir women are spoils of war. Later, Muhammad sent warriors. Khalid ibn al-Walid, you can look at it, it's the sword of Allah, to conquest, and he commanded in this, they reached more Christian regions, and that's why in this time the Surah 929 was sent down, the submission of the Christians and the Jews. Fight those who believe not in Allah, nor the last day, nor hold that forbidden which has been forbidden by Allah and His Messenger. This is a link to the Islamic law, to the Sharia, nor acknowledge the religion of the truth, Islam, even if they are of the people of the book, until they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. I give you another quote from the Sirah of Ibn Ishaq, chapter 973. In a 9-year period, Muhammad personally took part in 27 raids. There were 38 other battles and expeditions. This is a total of 65 armed events, not including assassinations and executions, for an average one armed event every 6 weeks. When Muhammad died, he said, this is the Hadith al-Bukhari. If you see the quotes like that, you look in volume 4, book 52, Hadith 288. Muhammad said there should be no religion in Arabia except Islam, and that money should continue to be paid to influence the kafir ambassadors from abroad, the non-Islamic ambassadors from abroad. This refers to the jihad of the money, and maybe you are familiar that the vice president of the European Parliament, not long ago, she got a lot of money from Qatar and Morocco to make it easier to get a visa. And I will give you another quote. This is a quote of Hassan al-Banna, the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, 1928 in Egypt. He said, when they tell you there is politics, tell them that this is Islam and we do not know the separation of religion and politics. Yeah, Islam is a hybrid society system with religion, with ethics, with law, with politics, with everything. And we, non-Muslims, we can go into debate on a political level, and that's what is very helpful because we don't want to harm any spiritual feelings of anybody. This shows Islamic colonialization. North Africa was Christian. Parts of Arabian was Christian, Iran was Zoroastrian, Afghanistan was Buddhist, Pakistan was Hinduist. A characteristic of political Islam is that earlier civilizations are being displaced. And it continued for 1,400 years. There's Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman and Ali, the four right-guided caliphs. Under Abu Bakr, there were the Ridda Wars. Many people wanted to leave Islam because Muhammad died. But I'm sure that you know there is the death penalty for apostasy. So this was executed a lot in this time. That's why political Islam could spread. And then there are the caliphs of the Umayyads, the Abbasids, and the caliphs of the Ottomans until 1924. And I will show you how it continues. According to the Islamic teaching, the whole world belongs to the Islamic Ummah, to the Islamic community. Political Islam outlines the concept of territory separation. Countries under Islamic rule are called Dar al-Islam or Houseland of Islam, and countries that are not under Islamic rule are called Dar al-Harb or Houseland of War according to the Sharia code. They are also called Land of the Enemy. This is not a country with borders or a state. These are regions where political Islam has taken the power. I'm sure that you have heard that in Europe we are dealing with no-go areas or zones sensibles in Paris. Yeah? We have these areas where the police doesn't enter anymore. And these are regions where political Islam has taken over all the power, and from these centers, political Islam is increasing and spreading. Also in Austria and in Germany, we have some areas which are critical at the moment. This is a demographic map. Usually we do not point to the people, we do not point mainly to individuals, but demography is a tool of political Islam. And why I show this map here is because we are in an institute which is dealing with national security. And it shows the centers of the crisis of the world. It shows North Africa, Somalia, Ethiopia, the Middle East, Armenia, Kashmir, the Balkan states. You can see that if we do not study the Islamic textbook, we will never achieve to find solution for the center of the crisis in the whole world. That's why I wanted to show this map. Let's go into the principles of the Islamic ethics according to the textbook, according to the Islamic basic, primarily texts. The goal of political Islam is submission. Islam means submission under Muhammad and Allah. It is He who has sent His messenger with guidance and the religion of the truth to proclaim it all over all religion, even so the pagans may detest it. There is a strategy for that. It's waging jihad and implementing step by step the Sharia, the Islamic law. The second caliph after Muhammad's death established the Treaty of Umar, Shurut Umar. Dhimis, Jews and Christians under Islamic rule have to pay the jizya tax, are not allowed to build new monasteries and churches, have always to give food and accommodations for Muslims, are not allowed to manifest their religion in public, have to wear recognizable clothing, are not allowed to carry weapons, they are not allowed to possess weapons, do not sell alcohol, no criticism of Muhammad. My colleague will take over this important topic. There is a prohibition to teach the Quran to non-Islamic children. The homes of non-Muslims must not be higher than the homes of Muslims. Dhimis are not allowed to ride on horses, only on donkeys. This is an institutionalized discrimination of non-Muslims, which is leading to the step-by-step conversion. And according to the strengths of political Islam in the region, the discrimination was higher or not so high. Let's go into the history. 10 years after Muhammad's death, Egypt was conquered by Islam. 10,000 people conquered Egypt. It was a late antique society of 1 million people there. And of course, at the beginning, the discrimination was not so high. And this is what in our school textbooks sometimes they describe it as the golden age of Islam, the peaceful living together, coexistence. But if you go a little bit deeper in that, if you do research on that, then you will see that it was the Dhimis who were living under Islamic rule, and that the discrimination was increasing as soon as political Islam has gained power. Also, in the Holy Land, in Israel, it was a Christian population under Islamic rule. The Christians, 1,000 past Christ, there was Al-Hakim, the Caliph Al-Hakim. The Christians could not longer visit the holy places. They were subjected to constant looting, kidnapping with ransom payments, and Caliph Al-Hakim, he destroyed 30,000 churches, and it was a really bad Christian persecution until Emperor Alexius Comnenus issued a call for help to Rome, and the European Christians have come to the aid of the Oriental Christians. We all know that this was the beginning of the Crusades in 1099, and for 200 years they could stabilize this country, and then it fell. Listen to Middle East Media Research Institute. They translate speeches of Islamic leaders, and this is a sheikh in Israel in June 2019. There is no sound, yeah. But you can read maybe. I have some other videos. I think this one was fine to read it. Everybody could understand it, but maybe yeah. This map shows 548 military jihad battles against the classic civilizations of Rome and Greece. In this time it was violent jihad, and political Islam was always pushed back with war, of course. Now, at the beginning of the 20th century, political Islam did not enter non-Islamic countries with violent jihad anymore, that's why also the response, the resistance has to be ideologically. Like Thomas Jefferson did it. It was Thomas Jefferson who was a diplomatic representative of America in Paris at that time. He was not yet president. And he was able to stop piracy in the Mediterranean Sea. He wondered why piracy did not stop, even so America was spending 20% of the state income as protection taxes. So he met the Islamic ambassador in Tripoli, who informed him that the Quran commands fighting against the Kafirs, against the non-Muslims. And that's why Thomas Jefferson studied the Quran. This Quran of Thomas Jefferson still exists in the US, I don't know where, with a preface, wonderful preface of Thomas Jefferson. And this is considered to be the founding moment of the US Navy as we know it today. Piracy was stopped in the two Barbary Wars. Let's do it like Thomas Jefferson. I already mentioned at the beginning of the 20th century, political Islam was weak. It was not a danger anymore. The West could resist. But if you study political Islam's textbook, you will see that there are other strategy and tactics to enter non-Islamic countries. And one of these tactics is Islamic migration, which we are confronted with in Europe a lot, and also trade, for example. And it is a matter of priority once political Islam enters a Kafir country to establish the political infrastructure. This is important because Islamic organizations become the authority on knowledge and define the strategy and tactics of subverting the existing Kafir constitutional order. I will show here the growth of Islamic organizations in Germany. Why does it grow so quickly in the last decades? Because there is no resistance. Nobody knows how to handle it. The seat of the political Islamic power centers are the mosques. Muhammad's life outlines these functions. US. Up. Yeah. It's in all the countries. Nevertheless, which constitution they have, it's the same. Political Islam has always the same strategy and tactics.
Sorry, are these organizations or populations?
These are organizations. That's what I really want to mention. We do not point to the people because we are open for all the peoples, for all the individuals. We point to the organizations which take over these functions. And we always go back to the Islamic primarily texts. And for example, the function of a mosque, according to the research in Quran, Sirah and Hadith. The function of a mosque, according to these papers, is a court for trials, verdicts and legal decrees, a place to carry out legal sentence, also such as stoning, a place for family law, a place to receive foreign diplomats, a war chamber, and weapons are also permitted in a mosque. So the next video, now we have a little problem because, no, it's also in English here. So this is a video, a recent video from Israel now. Maybe you can look if we can get the sound. Yeah. Now we come to the kafirs. There are more than 300 references to the kafir in the Quran. Kafirs are those who conceal the truth. Kafirs are the non-Muslims, and it's not a neutral term. Indeed, the worst of living creatures in the sight of Allah are those who have disbelieved and they will not ever believe. Cursed, wherever they are found, they shall be seized and murdered. Kafirs, according to the Quran, can be mocked, kafirs are hated, can be terrorized, can be beheaded, can be plotted against. Kafirs must not be befriended. There are certain surahs pointing that out. Kafirs are evil, can be humiliated, can be cursed, and can be persecuted. This is the doctrine. There is a strategy for the spread of political Islam. It's jihad. Jihad means struggle, effort. Every single deed in daily life can be used for jihad. And Muhammad's biography outlines that. As you see here, 2/3 of Muhammad's biography is about jihad. If you go to dialogue events, I don't know if this exists here as it exists in Europe, but if you go there, then you will hear the greater jihad, the inner spiritual jihad, to get up in the morning quickly and to be nice to the children and things like that. It's the spiritual jihad. And the statistical analysis of the Hadith al-Bukhari said that it's 2%, and the lesser jihad, which is in the case the violent jihad against the non-Muslims, it's 98%. But these terms are not according to the primarily doctrine. They were the first time they appeared in the 11th century, and they were mainly used for Sufism. But I mention it because it's used so much. But according to the Islamic texts, there is the jihad of the pen and the word, so treaties, school books, articles, jihad of the money. Unluckily, we can't go into that in depth, but it's a very important topic. Jihad of the sword, of the violence, and also Islamic migration is jihad according to the texts. There is a motivation for jihad, for the hijrah. Believers who participate in jihad increase their rank. Those who fight with their wealth and their lives for Allah's cause. The reward for jihad. The participation in jihad means the direct path to paradise, and all the previous bad deeds are erased. So those who immigrated or were evicted from their homes, this is the narrative of being evicted. Why? Because the whole world belongs to the Islamic Ummah. Or were harmed in my cause, or fought, or were killed, I will surely remove from them their misdeeds, and so on, and they get a big reward in heaven. Jihad is the most important deed, and you did not kill them, but it was Allah who killed them, and you did not slew, O Muhammad, when you slew, but it was Allah who slew. Fighting is prescribed for you, and you dislike it, but it is possible that you dislike a thing which is good for you, and that you love a thing which is bad for you. These two surahs show something very important. There is no free will, no decision of the own conscience in the Islamic teachings. There is the principle of al-wala wal-bara. Everything what Allah likes is good, and everything what Allah dislikes is bad. That's it. And we have to learn how jihad is applied in our societies, and it's exactly according to Muhammad's life. When political Islam is weak, it's the same than in the Meccan period. When it gains power, it's in the Medinan period, and when it has the upper hand, it's the conquest of Mecca. Let's go into that a bit. When political Islam is weak, we listen to the message of the peace. For you is your religion, and for me is my religion. Those of you who have attended dialogue events know this surah. But we know from the seerah, from Muhammad's biography, that while Muhammad gained for tolerance for Islam in the public, behind closed doors, he promises his followers already the dominion over the others, and Arab tribes and non-Arabs. There is a big difference if you go to a dialogue event in the parish or in the diocese, or if you go in a hidden mosque in Vienna. So you will listen to both of that. This is applied. Jihad in the media. This is the leader of an Islamic community. He attaches great importance to mercy towards all human beings, the absolute justice, the equality of woman and man, the separation of religion and state, an end to violence against in the name of religion, and to human rights as laid down in the Quran. That's exactly what we want to hear, and we get it. It's an announce in the newspaper. School classes are invited in mosques. And you can always look the name of the mosque. This mosque is called Fatih Mosque, and Fatih was the conqueror of Constantinople in 1453. And there is a kebab stand in Berlin, in Germany, at the station, which is called Fatih Servet, which means something like luck to the conqueror. We did an analysis of the school textbooks. And this is a school textbook for 12-year-old children, a history book for 12-year-old children in Austria, a recent one. Mohammed began to preach. He proclaimed that all men were equal, that the slaves had to be freed, and that one had to share his wealth with the poor. With this, he made enemies, and he had to immigrate from Mecca in 622. Finally, he gained so many followers that he could return to Mecca. After his death, Islam continued to spread. Why does it happen like that? Because this is not an Islamic school book. This is a school book which was written by Kafirs, non-Islamic people. But, as I said, the matter of priority is to establish the Islamic authority in the country. And if we, non-Muslims, want to know something, we turn to this authority. We should not turn to the authorities. We should turn to the primarily texts, to the textbook, because then we could understand what happens. In the second period of jihad, Muhammad migrated from Mecca to Medina, and you already know what happened. So slay them wherever you find them, drive them out from the places whence they drove you out, for persecution is worse than slaughter. We have to learn the language of political Islam, because there are similar terms but other definitions. And for example, persecution, according to the Islamic teachings, is the secular society order, or Christianity. This would be oppression of Islamic teachings. In this phase, there is an emphasis on the victim rule. The politicians are influenced a lot. This is called dawa, the invitation to Islam, demands for halal prayer rooms and times, and the activity against Islamophobia. My colleague will go into that a little bit more. That's happened in Vienna. This is the function of a mosque. Of course, it was everybody was shocked about these pictures, but it is the function of a mosque, to educate the children how history, war, everything. And when political Islam has the upper hand, we know that what happens, it's Afghanistan, Pakistan, and a really good example is 1979, the revolution in Iran. Then, when the sacred months have passed, slay the idolaters wherever you find them, and take them captive and besiege them and prepare for them each ambush. They fight in the cause of Allah, so they kill and are killed. And you who have believed, fight those adjacent to you of the disbelievers, and let them find in you harshness. Yeah, there are many surahs, I can't give you a lot, but if you want more, go in the self-studies. These figures are a rough estimate of deaths of kafirs by the political act of jihad found in Quran, Sirah, and Hadith in 1,400 years. When Muhammad conquered from Medina, Mecca, around the Kaaba there were 360 idols, and all these idols were destroyed. And the destruction of pre-Islamic culture or of non-Islamic culture is doctrine in the political Islamic teachings. Also, the previous cultures are destroyed. Go to do your own research about that. I already spoke about the contradiction in Quran and also in the life of Muhammad. It's like an ethical dualism, and this makes it very difficult for us to understand the doctrine. There is, for you is your religion, and for me is my religion, and accursed wherever they are found, being seized and massacred completely. So what is true? Both is true. Both is Islamic doctrine. Both can be applied. And of course, depending on the power of political Islam in a region, one verse or the other applies. And Quran solved this problem by itself. There is the law of abrogation. So the later verse, the Medinan verse, counts more or is more important than the earlier verse. That's called the law of abrogation, which is difficult to evaluate because the surahs are not ordered chronologically. Maybe you are familiar that deception is allowed for the spread of political Islam. In the Islamic teachings, there are a lot of words for deception. There is the taqiyya, al-marid, and also kitman. Kitman is putting away one part of a surah. This surah 532 is very famous. Whoever kills a human being killed all men, and whoever keeps it alive, it is as if he keeps all men alive. This surah is the headline of a declaration against violence and terror in Austria, which was signed by 300 imams. This surah is part of the Abu Dhabi Declaration. Who is familiar with this declaration? It's the declaration of fraternity of Pope Francis with the chief of the Al-Azhar University, Al-Tayyib in Egypt. And it's also part of this declaration. And the pictures you see here, this is the act of violent jihad in November 2020 in Austria and Vienna, and it was in the Jewish district. So behind there are the Jerusalem stairs, and it's very close to the synagogue. And now we all together, we open the Quran and we read. For this reason, we have prescribed for the children of Israel. So this surah is directed to the Jews, and it's a quote of the Talmud. Whoever kills a human being without committing murder or causing mischief on the earth, it is as if he had killed all men, and so on. Our messengers have already come to them with clear proofs. So the Jews were already invited to Islam. Dawah was ongoing. They had clear proofs. But thereafter, many of them have truly remained on the earth without measure. They did not submit under Muhammad and Allah. That's why it came to the next surah. But the reward of those who wage war against Allah and His Messenger and strive to do mischief in the earth is that they may all be killed or crucified, or have their hands and feet cut off in turn, or be banished from the land. This is a disgrace from them in this world, and in the hereafter there is for them a mighty punishment. It's allowed deception. Muhammad said, war is deception. The hypocrites wish to deceive Allah, but He will deceive them. And they schemed, and Allah schemed, and Allah is the best of schemers. As I already mentioned, we have to learn the definition of the same words. We have a lot of same words, but it's not the same definition of the word. Justice. What does justice mean according to the Islamic teachings? It means that the Sharia is completely applied. Dignity, freedom, and peace can only be under the rule of Islam. The Free Syrian Army is the Free Islamic Army. Democracy has a lot to do with demography. Human rights, my colleague will go into that. Freedom of religion, what does it mean? It's the freedom to live Islam. It has nothing to do with leaving Islam or with changing the religion. Oppression, tyranny, and terror, this is the secular social order. Victim, only Muslims can be a victim. A non-Muslim is per se a perpetrator, even if he is a little baby or an old woman. Not accepting Islam is being a perpetrator, is a crime. Charity, yeah. We can't open this topic here because charity in all the Islamic documents, beginning from the Quran and everything else, it's all, zakat is also used for the cause of Allah, which is jihad. It's a huge topic of Islamic financing. And I want to show you some misleading terms which are used a lot in Europe. Moderate Islam, radical Islam. We had a whole group who wanted to establish the Euro-Islam, Islamism, fundamentalist Islam, and many people say it's according to the interpretation. Yes, and we define it political, we define the part of the texts which are dealing with the non-Muslims, and we are talking about this topic on a political level. I just want to point to this topic. I won't go into that now, but Christians who believe that Jesus is God are disbelievers. But those who insist that Christ is God and part of the Trinity and who reject the true faith will be punished in hell. Do your own research, go into the homepage of Open Doors. There are more than 365 million Christians in 50 predominantly Islamic countries persecuted at the moment. These are the very newest dates. I will not go into the topic of women. I just want to show that non-Islamic women, kafir women, are seen as spoils of war. And this is one of the biggest justice and media scandals in Great Britain. In Rotherham alone, 1,400 kafir girls from the age of 11 were systematically subjected to gang rape by Islamic perpetrators. In Germany, we have 2 gang rapes caused by Islamic perpetrators. In Austria, it's increasing. We have the term femicide now. So go and do your own research. We do not point to the motives of the perpetrators. We connect it with the ideology of political Islam. The proportion of Jew hatred, I already mentioned, it is in Medina, where the high percentage of Jewish population was. It's more than in Hitler's Mein Kampf. This is a quote from the Hadith, which is also in the founding charter of the Hamas. The messenger of Allah said, "The last hour will not come until the Muslims fight the Jews, and the Muslims shall kill them all. And if a Jew hides behind a stone or a tree, the stone or the tree will say aloud, 'O Muslim, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him.'" Remember Kaiba, the war shout. That's what happened in Vienna in 2021 and ongoing from the 7th of October in our streets. Kaiba, Kaiba, O Jew, Mohammed's army will come back. In the center of Vienna. And I will finish with this conference in Norway, and then I have a very last slide.
Every now and then, every time we have a conference, every time we invite a speaker, they always can come with the same accusations. This speaker supports death penalty for homosexuals. This speaker supports death penalty for this crime or this crime. That is homophobic. They subjugate women, etc., etc., etc. It's the same
So our wishful thinking is the modernization of Islam, which was tried for many times in the 1,400 years. But why wasn't it successful? What do you think? It's the authorities. The authority in Islam is Muhammad and Allah, and are the books, are the texts. This is the opening of a Friday ceremony. The best speech is the book of Allah, and the best guidance is the guidance of Muhammad, and the most evil thing is to renew it, and any renewal in religion is misguidance, and every misguidance leads to hellfire. Education is the only long-term protection. There are several books written by Dr. Bill Warner, who studied and analyzed the primarily Islamic texts. They can help you to go into self-study, but of course we suggest to go into the primarily texts, go into Quran, go into the Sunnah, and do your own research and make your own conclusions. Thank you very much. Are there any questions maybe now, or I don't know, what is the... yes, please. Jetzt musst du mir helfen.
Thank you for the mentioning about taqiyya, but what is the difference between taqiyya and other principles? So we remember taqiyya is Quran 6:106.
So you are the expert. there are different terms: al-marid, taqiyya, kitman, and if you want, I can give you a whole paper on it that you can decide. So something is for, everything is for the spread of political Islam. Something is directed to the own community, and then yes, but I can give you something about that. Yes, please.
In the hierarchy, in the hierarchy you mentioned of, I guess the people respected to least respected by, I guess, members or leaders of the Islamic faith. Takfirs were left out, and I was wondering whether that was, or takfirism, was on the same level as kafir, or is that, you know, someone who has never been part of Islam who now believes something that whatever sect you are, you think is takfir, or just outsiders you consider them?
There is a huge amount of victims, tears of jihad, inner Islamic, because it's the purification jihad. Of course, if you call yourself a Muslim, but depending on the country where you live, you can live a free life in Austria, calling you a Muslim and living a secular life, but in Afghanistan or in Pakistan it will be much more difficult. So everybody is a kafir who is not submitting to Muhammad and Allah in the whole teachings at the end. I don't know if it responds your question. Maybe you make the moderation, because I don't know who was first. I think the
Hi, thank you very much for your talk. There was an article I was reading about Ernst Jünger in the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung
Bernhard, komm zu mir bitte.
in 2011, and it concludes with this quote from him about Hitler. So he cancelled this meeting with Hitler, and Jünger is quoted, he said, "Da machte auf mich einen manischen Eindruck, aber auch den Eindruck, den vielleicht Mohammed auf gewisse Ziegenhirten gemacht haben kann, als ob da etwas dahinter steckte." So like that Hitler gave him a manic impression, as if perhaps the same impression Mohammed made while preaching to the road herders. And my question is, it's 2024, I can't imagine a newspaper republishing this quote for 13 years on. So my question is, what are the different factors that are contributing to this kind of chilling effect in the media, where even a quote from Junger making that kind of more literary comparison is unimaginable.
I think my colleague will give the answer to this question in your speech. Don't you think so?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
Rephrase your question when you are ready. Perhaps some presentation.
Jaroslav Martiniuk, formerly as Radio Liberty. One of our presidents that was President of the United States between 2008 and 16 said, Islam is a religion of peace and tolerance. We know this from history from Andalusia, and I know it personally from my years in Indonesia. What would you say to this president?
Yes. I would say that he should study the Islamic texts, and he should go into history and connect the Islamic teachings to what happened in history, also during the Andalusian age. Because if you go a little bit deeper in this time, then you will see that there was a huge discrimination of non-Muslims in that time. There is a whole lecture on that.
Yeah, simply add.
Yes, please.
During Indonesia, from 2001 to 2006, and I've seen the Bali bombs impact on the Austrian Embassy, the Paris hotels. When we say religion of peace, the understanding is if the world is Islam as it was designed in the view of the texts, the first human being, Adam, was a Muslim, so everybody else, the whole world, whole humanity was designed as being Muslim. And that is, and the perception is, if that is accomplished, then there will be peace, because everybody has the same beliefs, and therefore there will be peace. That this is treacherous, we all know, because when we think where has been Islam accomplished, Afghanistan for instance, the day the Taliban took power, the war against the Islamic State started. They have the same beliefs, but the human factor comes in. They want power, they want influence, and all of a sudden the same belief doesn't mean anything anymore. The real, I mean, we will talk about that. The real issue is the undisputable totalitarian quest and claim for power. And the moment you have that, in all the ideologies we know from the 20th century, is that you have immediately fractions coming up. The communist system had that, the Nazis had that. Totalitarian regime never works because it's against human nature. And I think, therefore, the illusion that once everybody has the same faith, this will be then a peaceful world, I think is an illusion, and the reality checks prove that.
Please, you want to? No, I think you okay, please. Okay.
I wonder how we account for the less zealous brands of Islam, like the Ahmadiyyas, the Ismailis, the Sufis, who are in turn belittled by more zealous editions of Islam. I mean, the thing that saves us here is the fact that a death in Pakistan is most likely to be a Sunni killing a Shia. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest death tolls, and it's never highlighted. So that Sunni-Shia divide, which bespeaks the fanaticism of which you speak, is the thing that's going to save us.
Yeah. Bernhard, kannst du bitte diese Frage beantworten?
Well, I don't know what you understand by saving us. These various instruments, particularly the Ahmadiyya, is a grouping which is not, by most organizations, is not accepted as Islamic followers. For instance, when the bomb threats in Cologne happened just before Christmas, the Ahmadiyya made a demonstration by saying we are separate
once Islam is united, we're in big trouble. But the fact that it's inherent fanaticism guarantees these fissures in which death tolls are most likely to be among sects than against outside. That's an important tool.
The text is in.
Animosity among Islam we are coming in a minute. I will explain that where we can find university of all grades and all shades of Islam. It is possible that it happens. Please, sir.
Welcome everyone. My name is Winston Bay, Moorish American Muslim. I'm glad I came here. Went on Eventbrite a month ago. I hail out of New York. I live in Baltimore. And this is very beautiful for me because I'm always letting the Queen of the Head know that, you know, in the Surah Baqarah, 2nd chapter, 130, it says, whoever forsakes the religion of Abraham has made himself a fool. And that's like right in the Quran. And the treatment of women in the 4th chapter, you know, treat them with kindness and equity. You know, I'm so happy I studied Tasawwuf. I'm so happy I'm a student of Sheikh Jalali and Muridi. I'm so grateful for Sufism because there's parts of the Quran where it says that that Allah, which means God, translation, Allah is closer to you than your juggler. You know, Jesus said, Isa said, the kingdom of God is within you. You know, so I just want to just thank the Most High, whatever name, the nameless name, causes cause, rootless root, faceless face, whatever you call it, for being here because I really would like more of women in Islam because there's a difference between the culturalism of what country and culture and how countries mix their culturalism with Quran and everything else, where a lot of the women, it has turned into a male-dominant, misogynistic teaching. You know, so I just wanted to just thank for being here. But my question is, will you be doing something on women's and the rights of women in Islam soon?
Yes, we have a whole lecture on women, but we have only 1 hour here. That's the problem. Yeah, thank you so much for the statement. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It was very enlightening lecture. As I don't understand Islam at all, and it was very revealing to me. As I understand it, the way you described it, the ideology or the theology, or whatever adjective you want to put to it, has been in existence for at least 1,500 years. Is that a working assumption? 1,500, yes or no?
Why ask you this question? When you take the...
No, it's not a question. I have another question. I want an answer, but it is a question.
Yeah.
How long has Islam as a theology been in existence? I said 1,500 years. Am I right or wrong?
When you look in the scripts.
Yes,
Right.
am I right or wrong?
Yeah. So we.
Thank you.
No,
Wow.
just a short statement. Our approach is to study the Islamic texts as they are available now. There are other institutes, for example, in Hara, they are going into the early Islam research and the very foundation of Islam. They have come to other solutions that the ideology was step by step built up during the centuries.
I have a
but
question.
yeah.
Let's say Islam has been around a long time.
Yes.
Okay. How would you evaluate the threat in the 21st century versus the threat as it existed earlier, any time period, and what is the threat against? How would you evaluate the threat after 1,500 or 1,000 or 500 years? How would me, as somebody who knows nothing about the subject, realize that communism, that fascism, Trump is wrong, Biden is wrong, that Islam is the threat, how would you evaluate the threat today?
Okay, at this time, we would like to pause the questions. We're going to have a 5-minute break, so if you'd like to ask some questions to the guests, you can do so in the next room.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much that you are that enduring and are still here. I thank the Institute for arranging for this afternoon. For me, it is a particular pleasure to be here. This is a very personal reason. As you have heard, I was posted here as a young diplomat 35 years ago. And for me, it is the first time since I left at Christmas in 1992 that I'm back in Washington. So for me, this stay here in your wonderful city is very meaningful. Yeah, may I simply start my part of the lecture by answering your question, is Islam as a religion around for 1500 years, yes or no? Yes, when we look at the scripts and all the data given in Quran and the Hadiths, yes, we know when Muhammad was born, we knew what he did, when he did it. When we, however, talk to researchers on early Islamic history who only base their findings on archaeology and historic research, there is no trace of Muhammad. As one archaeologist said, archaeology is not kind to Islam. There is no, also in third literature, there's no reference to somebody like Muhammad. And also when the big Arabic conquest started under the Umayyad dynasty, there's no reference to be found on a religion called Islam. It is only in the late century, that means about 150 to 200 years after the life of Muhammad, that Islam as a religion was written down and was called Islam. When we leave the scripts, the primary texts, and look at conventional archaeology and historic research. And that would mean, as a religion, it is, according to conventional research, 200 years younger. So in the late 8th century, Islam as a religion and also the Quran and the Hadiths as texts started to exist. So the first writings were about 150 to 200 years after the presumed life of Muhammad. But we stick to the scripts because that is what is relevant in the world of Islam and not any other findings. Although interesting they might be, political Islam does not take anything else into consideration. Therefore, we stick to the findings of the scripts, not saying that this is the truth, but this is our working method for a simple reason. In reality, this is relevant. Yeah, we've heard the early history of Islam. We've heard about the primary texts. And now I should like to take two aspects of what does that mean in today's political life. What does this mean in international relations, in multilateral relations, and in the among Islamic countries? One of the, I think, most important recent documents is the so-called Cairo Declaration on Human Rights in Islam, which was released in 1990 under the umbrella of the Organization of Islamic, at the time it was Islamic Conferences, today it's Islamic Cooperation. This is very important to understand that the Organization of Islamic Cooperation is the biggest voting bloc in the United Nations. It has 57 members. One member has been temporarily suspended, but you see the red dot in the middle, which is Syria. And these 57 countries have unanimously, because you were asking, is there unanimously, is there a consensus within Islamic countries, have released this Declaration on Human Rights, and we will see that this is a very important declaration of intent and also of a vision the world of Islam has, and this was put forward to the United Nations And they are also explaining how this text should be interpreted. What is also important is that the Cairo Declaration is configured in a UN-compatible language, is a rather short document with 25 articles, can be downloaded from the internet in all languages, and is, has been presented to the United Nations and other organizations like the European Council, like the European Union, and others. And when we look at the year 1990, that was exactly the moment when the Cold War stopped, the Iron Curtain fell. That was the moment where it was clear that a new sort of political magnetic field in the world was emerging, and that was when these 57 Islamic countries gave their vision, published their vision in consent. So there was unanimity. Yeah, this is just a brief overlook on the various categories of Islamic countries. We have countries where Islam is the foundation of the state. That's Afghanistan, Iran, Mauritania, Oman, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Yemen. Then we have a category where the Islam is the state religion. Is Algeria, most of the Emirates, etc. And then we have a category where Islam is not specifically declared. That's Bosnia-Herzegovina, Indonesia, Niger, Sierra Leone, and Syria. And then we have a category where Islam is not state religion. And that is Albania, Azerbaijan, Bangladesh, etc., Kosovo. And when you look at the countries which are underlined, these are countries who are potential new members of the European Union. Quite interesting, because we will see this Cairo Declaration is publishes an intent which is totally contrary to all what has been written down in the United Nations and elsewhere in the non-Islamic world.
You said that those dots being there considered for the EU?
Which dots?
The dots.
Yeah, the dots say that there's a text between the preamble and the text I quote.
On the previous slide.
On the previous slide, let me see. Oh.
The next. No, you have a circle after the words instead of a period. A full circle. What is for Syria and the UAE? They were, and yeah, one more. So I was just...
No, but I don't understand what dots do you mean.
After Yemen? Okay.
Oh, no, that doesn't mean anything. That is yeah, this is just yeah, no, this is just a formation which has been unintentionally. No, that is with no meaning. Yeah, and what is interesting is how does that what we've learned just reflect in a contemporary document. In the preamble it says, reaffirming the civilization and historic role of the Islamic Ummah, which Allah made the best community and which gave humanity universal and well-balanced civilization. It is the quest that Islam is universal. Everybody is considered to be part of Islam and is asked to join. Then also one criteria which is interesting, that knowledge is not separated from faith. Faith and knowledge go very closely together. You also could say faith is limiting knowledge. That is the reality of this formulation. And according to the 57 members of the OIC, humanity is confused because they are not part of Islam or are not unanimously joining Islam or immediately joining Islam. And a dignified life in accordance with Islamic Sharia is also one claim. Now we have to understand what Sharia is. We will come to that later. Yeah. And this article 25 is the last article of the Cairo Declaration, and this gives an authentic interpretation how the Cairo Declaration can be interpreted. The Islamic Sharia is the only source of reference for the explanation or clarification of any of the articles of this declaration. That means there is no other interpretation possible than Sharia. And here is article number 1. Human rights being, all humans being from one family whose members are united by the subordination to Allah and descent from Adam. That's what you have also said before. Even in a modern document, the perception is written down that humanity originates from Adam. Adam is considered to be the first Muslim, and all descendants therefore also belong to Islam. The true religion is the guarantee for enhancing such dignity along the path to human integrity. All human beings are Allah's subjects, and his subjects, and no one has superiority over another except on the basis of piety and good deeds. So everybody is equal, but there are better and lesser believers. Yeah, and now we have to have a closer look to Sharia, because Sharia is basically, when you look at this document, every subject is like education, like public life, even science and technology, information, that means media. Everything is only admissible within the margins of Sharia. And Sharia is not a few rules which one likes or one doesn't like. It's a system. It is a system which says only laws are permissible which can be derived from the scripts. Anything else, when a parliament decides on a law, and this law cannot be put into any relationship with the scripts, then it is, according to this declaration, not valid, which means democracy as we know it is not possible under this framework. There's no freedom of religion. In Sharia, there's no freedom of speech. There's no freedom of thought or art, no freedom of the press, no equality of people before the law, because you have men and women are not equal before the law, and believers and non-believers are not equal before the law. Yeah, suppression of people of different beliefs. You've heard the system of dhimis, which clerics continuously underscore that this is still valid, and discrimination of homosexual, well, that is well known. Yeah, and then the big instrument, which is the opponent of the Cairo Declaration, is of course the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, released by the United Nations, or under the umbrella of the United Nations, in 1948. And right at this moment, the delegation of Saudi Arabia in 1948 deposited a reservation by saying 2 articles are definitely unacceptable, that everyone has the right to change his or her religion or belief, and equal marriage rights, and in particular to have a free choice of marital partners. And then in 1982, Iran did something similar. Why 1982? Because the Shah of Iran was ousted in 1979, and his approach was he would go beyond the Islamic tradition. He would also refer to the pre-Islamic Zoroastrian culture Iran had, in order also to underscore a regional importance which goes beyond Islam. And therefore, the Shah did not oppose the Universal Declaration, but the mullahs, once they were in power, very much did so. Yeah. Now, which are the articles of the Universal Declaration which are in conflict with political Islam? The right to equality, the freedom from discrimination, the freedom from slavery, the freedom from torture and degrading treatment, the right to equality before the law, the right to marriage and family, freedom of belief and religion, freedom of opinion and information, right of peaceful assembly and association, right to participate in government and free elections, right to desirable work and join trade unions, and the right to education. Because all these chapters are mentioned in the Cairo Declaration, but in the final sentence it always says only within the framework of Sharia. Now, in 1990, the Cairo Declaration was released under the umbrella of the OIC, but in 2000, the members fully and officially supported the Cairo Declaration, and by then was signed by 45 out of 57 members. Yeah, the Cairo Declaration is considered to be the Islamic society, or the Declaration considers the Islamic society as the representative of God on earth, thus promoting Islam as the only true religion. Human rights are given by Allah, have universal and eternal validity, and nobody can change them. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights 1948 is not correct, and it is not based on Islamic religion, the true and only religion sent by God's last prophet. Therefore, we have there we see the nature of Sharia. Sharia is a legal system, is a legal approach which says only laws which are directly deriving from the scripts can be accepted. And purely laws designed by human beings are not accepted for an Islamic society. Islam and Sharia are the sole sources of human rights, and Islamic society is the best guard of them. All the rights and freedoms stipulated by the Cairo Declaration are subject to Islamic Sharia. The Islamic Sharia is the only source of reference for the explanation or clarification of any of the articles of the Cairo Declaration. When we look at that, then we can't help it than to call this a indisputable quest for global power, and it is the blueprint for a Sharia-censored society. Needless to say that this is entirely contrary to all what we have agreed within the United Nations and in almost all non-Islamic countries. Yeah, the arguments of political Islam in favor of adopting the Cairo Declaration. Mankind is united to form the Ummah. Mankind is united to form the Ummah and should be submitted to Allah. This term submitted is already something where we feel quite uncomfortable. The guarantor of human rights is true faith. Women do not have the same rights and obligations as men. Education should be in line with Sharia as the future direction for society. Islam is presented as a beneficial for mankind, and the state should guarantee education about Islam. Islam is the unspoiled religion. Science, literature, arts, technology should be in line with Sharia. I mean, this puts an incredible limitation to a development of a society. All criminal acts should be judged by Sharia law. Freedom of expression is limited by Sharia. Any information should be used in accordance with Sharia. This is a very clear language which we rarely find in current documents. And now, what was the reaction, for instance, of the Council of Europe? The Parliamentary Assembly evaluated the Cairo Declaration when it was presented and came to the conclusion: the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion may not aim at the destruction of other European conventions, rights, or freedoms. Separation of state and religion, this principle should continue to be respected. The 1990 Cairo Declaration on Human Rights in Islam is based on Sharia law. Sharia law is applied in several Council of Europe members states or parts thereof. I mean, that was a finding of the Council of Europe, that despite the fact that it is totally incompatible, the reality showed that in 2 member states, the UK and Greece, informal Sharia councils were in use and acted as judiciary. And that was criticized by the Council of Europe. I don't know about the UK, but in Greece, these Sharia councils are in some parts still in place. Yeah, the Parliamentary Assembly further said that these various Islamic declarations on human rights adopted since the 80s have failed to reconcile Islam with universal human rights. That seems to be quite a firm statement, but the Organization of Islamic Cooperation did not stop. They, to this day, are very much committed to apply and to materialize the ideas of that declaration. And now the question is, where precisely is Sharia incompatible with democratic societies? The institution of Sharia law and the theocratic regime are incompatible with the requirements of a democratic society. Where human rights are concerned, there is no room for religious or cultural exceptions. The Greek authorities still do not abolish the application of Sharia law in Thrace, which is eastern Greece bordering to Turkey. Judicial activities of Sharia councils in the United Kingdom, the ruling of the Sharia councils clearly discriminate against women in divorce and inheritance cases. Because that is also something, if you look when in a country Islamic parties gain power, they aim to achieve 3 things. They want to change the family law, the inheritance law, and they want to establish a blasphemy prohibition. But we will come to that later. Informal Islamic courts may also exist in other Council of Europe member countries. You must not forget that the Council of Europe has many more members than the European Union. It goes far beyond. There are also countries like Azerbaijan, even Russia. Russia, by the way, has been expelled on the 24th of February 2022. But most of the Caucasus states, and of course also countries like Ukraine, who are not members of the European Union, are part of the Council of Europe. So is, for instance, also Turkey. Yeah, this is the end as to the Cairo Declaration, and we will continue with how can we measure that the ideas of the Cairo Declarations are implemented despite the fact that it was rejected by the United Nations and also other important institutions and organizations. And I take only one criteria out, yeah, and that is Islamophobia. Islamophobia is initially simply blasphemy. It's another term. And it was in March 22 that the United Nations adopted a resolution to establish a day to combat Islamophobia. This was a big surprise because within the United Nations, within the community of international legal experts, Islamophobia was never defined what it is. If you just take the term, phobia is an unreasonable, pathological fear. When you look at the translation in, for instance, German, in the publications of German Islamic organizations, they immediately translate it with Islam hostility, which is something totally different. And how did this term Islamophobia enter the vocabulary of the United Nations? I advance a bit further. Yeah. Yeah. In 1998, the OIC has replaced the term blasphemy with Islamophobia to make the accusation more acceptable to Western governments. Because blasphemy is a medieval term where everybody says it's appalling, it's not accepted. So the organization said, let's find another term, and they were very successful. Because when we look around, everybody is accusing anybody of Islamophobia, and this is a term which, because of this UN resolution, has entered the vocabulary of the United Nations without much of a notice. So they were very successful simply to change the etiquette for their quest to have a blasphemy prohibition entering into Western legal systems. Yeah, and then when we take the relevant parts of the text of this UN resolution, which was presented by Pakistan and in the name of the OIC. Yeah. Islamophobia has emerged as a new form of racism with an added gender aspect, as girls and women are targeted due to their dress and the notion that they are oppressed. This shows very well what we have heard. Not to accept Islam is not something which is your choice. But if that is done, that is a reason to be attacked. And this attack is not an attack, but seen as a defense of Islam. And, you know, one of the representatives of an Islamic organization in Europe said to take away the compulsory wearing of the headscarf is taking away the right of the women to develop as fully Muslim women. I mean, this shows the mindset which is behind the spreading of Islam, what is understood under this term. And briefly to the historic run-up until this declaration was adopted. The OIC declared in 2012, which means it's about 20 years after the release of the Cairo Declaration, and the Cairo Declaration was by all non-Islamic institutions rejected. They decided that they would not try again to ask the United Nations for support for a ban on religious insult, but called on states to enforce hate speech laws related to Islam. So they're not approaching the plenary of the United Nations, but they try through their members to manipulate individual countries to establish and to implement as much as possible of the Cairo Declaration. And then also something which is very important and for us difficult to understand, that the non-believers must stay out of discussions about Islam, which is quite unusual because everybody else would like to convince by spreading the teachings. No, with Islam it's different. You should first convert and then you're confronted with the teaching. Since its founding, the OIC has attempted to enforce the doctrine of blasphemy in all countries. Yeah, that is pretty obvious. But blasphemy is not called blasphemy anymore, but Islamophobia. Any speech or statement that insults Sharia authorities is punishable as blasphemy or slander. I mean, that is very important to understand why this blasphemy prohibition is so important for political Islam is because that is the instrument to remove and silence political critics and opponents. These laws are very vaguely defined. What is an insult? And here it says clearly, anything which might insult an Islamic institution is punishable. And there was a very prominent case in Indonesia, 2016. There was a member of the Chinese minority who was a very promising candidate for the election as governor for Jakarta. And during the election campaign, he was all of a sudden confronted with a blasphemy accusation. And this was so absurd that even renowned clerics declared this was not permissible to raise any charges against him. But it was so politicized that the clerics were not listened at. He was put for trial, was sentenced. And when you are sentenced, and that's always, when you have a blasphemy prohibition and you are sentenced under that, there's always a provision there that you are not allowed anymore to run or hold public office. And that's exactly the instrument to remove your political opponents. And that makes it so important for political Islam to come with this Islamophobia. And also, as we could see in the introduction of the Pakistani representative, he said Islamophobia is a new form of racism, because there are prohibitions and sentences in every Western, every non-Islamic society against racism. And if you can link Islamophobia to racism, you don't need any blasphemy prohibition anymore. Then you simply equal blasphemy, Islamophobia with racism, and there you are. So one can clearly say there is a consensus among the 57 countries when it comes to a strategy vis-à-vis the non-believers, vis-à-vis non-Islamic countries. So there is consensus when it comes to that point. Yeah, and then briefly, how were the reactions by the European Union? You, of course, a member of the European Union, we are very much concerned how did our institutions react to that? Because this blasphemy prohibition was always rejected, and all of a sudden the General Assembly adopts such a resolution without any debate. And France at the time was president of the European Union and gave a vote explanation. You know, in a adoption process in the United Nations, you can either vote for a resolution, you can vote against it, you can abstain, and you can vote plus an explanation. You can explain your voting, but that's a very sort of a low signal of opposition. And France explained, Islamophobia has no agreed definition in international law. France supports the protection of all religions and beliefs. However, the creation of an international day does not respond to concerns to fight against all forms of discrimination. All that would mean one should vote against it. And further, his delegation had proposed a text that endorsed the freedom of religion and belief. He, that's the representative of France, said, voicing his regret that none of those proposals were taken into account. All discrimination should be condemned with equal condemnation and vigor. Although the proposal had not been considered, his delegation decided not to oppose the resolution's adoption, he said. The only reason why one voted for it was not because one agrees, but one simply doesn't want to disturb the consent. So I think this is quite a change of voting behavior in such an important case. And then also the European Commission, who is not a member of the United Nations, but has observer status and can therefore also give a declaration. The European Commission declared, stressing that the bloc is strongly opposed to all forms of hostility and violence. However, he noted his concern with the approach of singling out one religion. That is also very important. Single out one religion does not give equality to various faiths. This approach risks undermining the universal approach of the United Nations. There should be a right to debate and criticize religions. That's a very important statement, and I think the rest of Europe would have wished that this would have been put forward more prominently. So thank you very much for enduring, and please, we are open for debate. Please, Preston.
Thank you very Thank you very much. So it occurs to me that this attack, the characterization of what a particular group just calls blasphemy, which they can make it up as to anything they wish, as insulting Islam, etc., is right in line with the same kind of thing that happened during the terror of the French Revolution, when it was adequate to say "j'accuse" and you would lose your head. I've heard that all future revolutions will take on that aspect of the French Revolution and the terror and Cambodianization. Do you think there is a tendency, a movement to start a great world war of Islam against the rest of us? Or is that just
I think then. One should never worry about anything because we live in dangerous times. But I think if we look what happens now, I mean, all the emotional upheavals around Gaza would have been such a moment. But there's very little consensus among the Islamic countries to have a concerted efforts to go. Iran steps back. Saudi Arabia says the Abrahamic Accords are still on the table. Right now, I can't see that. But to say there's nothing to worry about in the future, no, at the contrary. I would very much worry about that. Yes, please.
A lot of semantics. When you see the list of things you put under as what it isn't allowed freedom of religion, in America, if your rights come from your creator, you're almost saying the same thing, but then separated, the government isn't given the power to be that. So there's a lot of semantics, whereas if you're saying freedom of religion, it's the inescapable. It's the God is the light. So if it's Sharia, the sense of justice where you're in the light of the Lord, the all-powerful, all-knowing, and it's not the body of people making judgments on what's written. So it's actually a much higher standing, akin to your rights are from your creator. Then also in the Constitution, you're talking about it submitted under Allah. Our Constitution is subscribed done in the year of our Lord, which is in the Christian calendar. So there's a lot.
I know what you mean. We are not really so much into comparing our religions, but there can be one thing said because there Islam sticks out. If you go through the scripts, Allah rules into every detail of the human being. Even what you do in bed, etc. So there is hardly any space of maneuver and decision. Whereas when we look at Christianity, God gives you the mandate to shape your life to your liking. Yes, there are the commandments and there are things to observe, but other than that, other religions give you a full spectrum of liberty of action, which Islam denies explicitly. And in the Cairo Declaration, it really says that every second paragraph mentions the Sharia as a limitation. Yeah. Yeah.
How does Sharia have a holier
interpretation? I mean, you have to make the reality check in existing Islamic societies today. There you can see what sort of margin of interpretation you have today. Sorry, there was in behind.
Mr. Ambassador, you and your colleague have made overwhelming cases that political Islam is incompatible with the values of Europe, America in general, this political Islam that seeks to basically remake societal values. The case you make is overwhelming. We've seen that, the struggles in Europe. My question to you is more of a pragmatic question. Where does this leave political decision makers in Europe? Your advice for Americans as well, because what you put up from the French delegation and the General Assembly, the response of the European Commission, it seems this stuff that is so indecisive that it leaves the initiative in the hands of political Islam that would remake our societies.
Yeah, I mean, if you ask me what should be done, the influence of Islam and the concessions which are given to Islam and not to other religions, that has to stop. You're entirely right. There's indecisiveness and there is a shyness to criticize a religion. At least something which is still considered to be a religion. But on the other hand, if we look at the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, these are governments. Erdogan is government. Saudi Arabia is government. The mullahs, government. There's no religion. It's about ruling. And the all-combining mission statement of the various grades and shades of Muslim Brotherhood is spreading of Islam until it rules the world. And I think that together discredits Islam as a religion. It's a form of governance. It's the quest for global, indisputable power. Yeah?
Hi. I'm personally a victim of persecution by so-called, maybe better term is Islamist aggression, and I stand here as a Muslim who sees no difference between forcing a woman to wear something or not to wear something. And just to give you a thought here, the presentations sit on lack of nuance that fails to clarify the rather recent and 20th century foundations of political Islam. So there is a lot of blending of political Islam with Islam. There is a lot of going back and forth. Political Islam is a child of post-1980 and post-communism essentially. And also, if in a larger period, it's a child of post-World War dynamics. These governments that assert these, assertively worded documents are doing this because they are all based on, mostly based on regimes that take Islam as a regime and citizenship marker. So we are talking about regime protection efforts that play into the hands of an ideology. And that's okay, but if you generalize this and say Islam itself is an endless quest for power, then you are indirectly and inadvertently playing into the hands of political Islamists who are absolutists and who say this is the way we interpret it and this is the way it should be, because they believe sovereignty is an unflexible concept. It comes from God, whereas there are other Muslims who believe a two-layered of sovereignty, cosmic sovereignty and worldly sovereignty, which is delegated to the humankind. And we are entitled to use it in the way we desire. So there are these competing approaches among Muslims. So there is this risk of disregarding one effort while associating the entire Islamic history, experience, and society with one. The clash is between absolutism and self-reflexivity. That's, as a Muslim, that's my testimony and my humble reflection on that. And in this context, during the previous presentation, I had a sense that the dialogue efforts were portrayed as almost cosmetic efforts. I have to object that some Muslims are butchering some non-Muslims in various corners of the world. And unfortunately, this is not an illusion. This is happening right now. And other Muslims are genuinely involved in a set of dialogue work across the globe, which is not cosmetic, which is not reactionary, which is solidly grounded in their interpretation of Islam, and that's not an illusion either.
Yeah, I think what you said is quite important. When we come back to the term political Islam, in particular when we look at the European current experience, are measures to give Islam political authority in non-Muslim societies. That's what we experience. There is hardly a single Islamic organization in Europe which is not linked to the countries, the members of the OIC, who is not supportive of them and does not implement their policies. So the dialogue happens with these organizations, and when you see, they come and want to have concessions at the expense of everybody else. When you bring them together, we would like to talk about new interpretations of Islam which are somehow compatible with living together with other beliefs. And to talk about rights of women to shape them, that it is acceptable for every faith. But the organizations came saying, no, we don't want to have that. We want to have more money for social contributions for our followers, and we want to have more money for mosques to build up our infrastructure, for instance. So you can see this dialogue is aiming to increase political influence and not to solve the issue at the roots. Yes, of course, in Islamic countries, when you look at the people who are suffering, I mean, I'm a child of the Cold War. My first posting was in Poland during martial law. Everybody was talking about the government and how horrible this is, etc. And then I came to Algeria, an Islamic country, in '98, which was a very hard period, and the same rhetoric. Everything was only about the government because conditions were so harsh. And so I see the parallel of totalitarian rule. And I think we have to accept that in most Islamic countries, in particular when we look at Iran, also at Pakistan, certainly Afghanistan and others, that this is the quest for a totalitarian rule. And these countries are supporting the relevant institutions of Islam in Europe. That is the dilemma. There is no relevant structure, no relevant organization which provides a different perspective. And if you look at Islam and reform of Islam, the so-called modernists appeared the first time around the 1850s. In view of the overwhelming power and superiority of the colonial powers, there started a debate in many Islamic countries in the Middle East how to reshape the society to make it more compatible and more and stronger against the colonial powers. And if you take that process, and this process is going on, this is not over, and you make a screenshot now, where is this process now? Where are institutions and movements which were not here, let's say 50 or 60 years ago? You come up with Hezbollah, with Hamas, with Islamic State, with Muslim Brotherhood, with Al-Qaeda, and a failed Kemalism. The only really important reform movement was initiated by Kemal Atatürk, and Erdogan has stopped it and ended it. And that is the sad story, because again, this reform movement was not a theological movement. It was initiated by a government or by a ruler. So wherever you come to important developments, it's always about governance, it's always about rulers, and it's about governments and governance. So there is, you know, we had in Indonesia, it was just before 9/11. The Francophonie had an event organized on Islam and democracy. And there was the Grand Mufti of Marseille who gave the keynote address to start this event. And he said that the dilemma of Islam today is its theological stagnation and its politicization. This, I think, is a very statement to the point. And to separate the faith from the quest of power, I can't see any structure where I could say that's what we should support. These are partners. I can't see that. I mean, perhaps you can help me and help us, but I can't see it right now. It would be highly desirable, but I can't see it.
I'll be happy to highlight some kind of efforts after maybe.
Yeah. I think you wanted.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you, how do you see the impact of the folklore on the revival of political Islam? What is the way forward?
The way forward is, no, because I think we have to be more conscious and have to contain it where it is inappropriate to make concessions which are against what is important to us, what is in our constitutions, what we have agreed within the United Nations. We make concessions beyond, and that has an influence on all parts of society, in particular in Europe where we feel it. Yeah.
Again, I'm so excited to be here because I have lectures in Baltimore, in libraries, pretty much on this whole intellectual level. This reminds me of a hadith that says, 3 generations after me will no longer be of me. I always had this question, why would Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, his last khutbah, his last lecture, he said there's no white over black, no black over white, no Arab over non-Arab, no non-Arab over Arab. And, you know, why would a man say that unless it was going on back then? So, you know, statements like that someone would make unless that activity was happening back then, you know. And then with the word semantics, you know, and the word spelling, you know, when you cast a spell, you know, from blasphemy to Islamic phobia, convincing people to follow in this direction, you know, it just amazes me, you know, how you and the sister just, I look back and I say to myself, okay, so what's the need of a Mahdi? You know, they talk about the coming of a Mahdi, you know, and Dajjal, and all of these things in Islamic folklore, or shall we say. But there is a patriarchal psychology that I'm looking at. And I think it's trauma bonding. You know, I'm looking at how it's like an evolution of a virus. You know, from one extreme to another, from country to country. And I think hadiths were written 70 or 100 years after Prophet Muhammad died. And the Sharia, I mean, even the Quran says, I think it's this 22nd chapter or 33rd chapter, that Allah appointed to every nation its own act of worship. And to every nation, they have their own way of worshiping. The 2nd chapter, 62, it says, we believe in Allah. It says, whoever believes in Allah, you know, whether you're Jew, Christian, or Sabian, whoever believes in Allah on the last day shall have their reward with their Lord, and there's no fear upon them, neither shall they grieve. Now, this is Quran. You know,
But there are enough verses who say exactly the opposite.
So I'm, as you're speaking on political Islam, I'm looking at how far astray from the script a lot of these trauma bonding leaders are going, because it seems like they're trauma bonded. So my question is, how can I explain to a neophyte the difference between political Islam and the essence of what Islam really is? Someone that's brand new.
The political Islam is an Islam which wants to govern and to rule. And that is predominantly the expression of all Islamic organizations, Islamic countries. It's about ruling. What the essence is of the Islam theologically, we're not getting into that. Here we are, because I'm a kafir. I want to look at that which has a political impact, and what you believe should be yours. Yeah. Please.
For the last 20 or so years, there's been an attempt to silence critics of Islam in Europe. And the list is very long. It starts with Rushdie, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, Van Gogh, and until Oriana Fallaci was one of the first ones. And these people are threatened with prosecution, arrest, fines, and of course death. In the case of Van Gogh. What is the situation today? Has there been any change in the attitudes? When somebody is criticizing Islam, is he susceptible to being arrested for blasphemy? And what is the consensus in Europe today?
Yeah, there is an incredible shyness, and there's still a mainstream who believes they're blaming their own peers and their own kin of Islamophobia. We had a professor who has an Iranian father and a German mother, and he had a tenure on Islamic law and ethics in Vienna. And when he was appointed and started his tenure, he was immediately attacked by Islamic organizations because he came from he came from Harvard and other renowned academic institutions. That was his background. And he did not come from the faith, although he was born as a Muslim, had a childhood as a Muslim, but then his parents moved to Germany and he took a different path. And I met him, I asked him, who are these people who are attacking you? And he said, it's the Muslim Brotherhood does not give me sleepless nights. It is the white, liberal, green person. So it's the own, that is currently, Muslims who are critical, they are endangered by Islamic organizations. There are many who cannot live without 724 personal protection. That's quite enormous, and still there is not really a wake-up call. There hasn't been a wake-up call where you could say the mood is changing. But Macron, David Cameron, they all said it is not only about terrorism, it is about Islam getting into our, political Islam getting into our societies on a legal basis. Please?
I just had, my name is Will Moorhead. I just had more of a general question. What's been happening with Israel and Gaza has been happening for decades. Why is it now that all these other countries are getting involved when it seems like they've provided no aid, ignored Palestine, and it's just opportunism? Like I'm kind
Well, they have to say, this is not our subject. So whatever I say is my personal opinion and has nothing to say with the group I'm representing and the fellow academians I work together. Because we are not getting into the Middle East conflict and presenting recipes for a peace order. We are entirely looking at the scripts and what is the result and the impact today. But I can give you personally an opinion because it is predominantly about the hegemony in the Middle East. I mean, when you look at Iran, who is so hostile against Israel, it has no relevance. What Israel does or doesn't do has no relevance to Iran. But if what Iran wants, it wants to be the dominating power in the Middle East, in particularly versus Saudi Arabia. If they say, we want to be dominated and Saudi Arabia has to be submissive to us, then the whole Arabic world will be against Iran. So therefore, they talk about Israel, but mean hegemon. And therefore, the Houthis all of a sudden do something which doesn't make any sense for their lives. And that also applies to the relationship Israel with now getting more and more agreements with Gulf states and with Saudi Arabia. And Hamas is all of a sudden has the feeling the supporters run away. And so they had to do something. Yeah, it's about the concert of powers in the Middle East. And the Palestinians, I mean, imagine this disaster and Egypt doesn't even open the borders to help anybody. It doesn't even permit to enter relief transport into there. Jordania declares if there's one Palestinian coming, this is a case of war for us. I mean, so you can see that there's a lot else in the play.
A note on terminology. You said you're a kafir, which is a caricaturized definition of the term that is used by the absolutist political Islamic angle. This is a contested term. There are people who use this caricaturized version, equating not being a Muslim with being kafir. But there is also a more nuanced definition that says a person who doesn't believe is not a kafir, whereas a person or an organized effort who is deliberately investing time, energy, power into keeping people away from religious faith and freedom is kafir. So I don't think you have such an agenda, Your Excellency, of preventing people enjoying their religious beliefs.
No,
so,
by no means. As long as they leave me alone. That's very important, yeah. Yeah.
So which means, again, that you're not a kafir. I invite you to avoid using those caricaturized versions of terms.
But they're in the scripts. They're in the primary texts. They're in the primary texts.
Yeah.
That's what we...
Which is an indirect form of support the Islamist angle. Same goes for Sharia. There are those reductionist definitions of it. And there are Muslims who say, no, Sharia in Washington, D.C. is the American Constitution. You like it?
Yeah, but these are individuals, and they are in great number, but they have no voice. Because other organizations, we can see that in Europe, if anybody comes up with a different version, then the person has to be under protection. There is no relevant movement which sees things differently. Kemal Atatürk, he tried to stop political Islam. He tried to move Islam out of government and just keep it to the spiritual domain. And thanks to President Erdogan, this is over.
I am Kurdish. Please don't get me started on Kemal.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I just want to add that's why it's so important that we do not point to the individuals and to the people. And we could not turn to those who want inside Islam to do the to modernize the Islamic texts, because we would endanger them tremendously. So in Europe, if you would support them, we know some of them, and if we go to lectures, that's 24 hours with bodyguards. So we studied the primarily Islamic texts from the non-Muslim perspective of view, so from the non-Islamic perspective. And that's why, of course, for you or for others, we are not kafirs, but if we study the texts for Allah and for Muhammad, there are more than 340 descriptions in the Quran. So that's what we do, and maybe we just leave it here. And thank you so much for the debate. It's so important to open up the debate and to go into that, and please go in the self-study and do your. Nobody has to believe us. Prove everything what we said. Go in the primary texts, and yes, and keep on dealing with this subject, because it's important for everybody.